Hello, everyone. My name is Charles Noah Hurley, and I am here with three wonderful guests. And today we're going to talk about opportunities in communications, public relations, and marketing. We have Contessa Kellogg Winters, Chanel Reynolds, and Charlita Rodriguez. And I'll let you lovely ladies tell them about yourselves. We'll start with Contessa.
Thanks so much, Charles. Yes, I'm Contessa. I am currently Senior Vice President at Clyde Group, a boutique PR firm in Washington, D.C. I've been in public relations about 20 years now, and my background was initially working on Capitol Hill, where I started out with Senator Bob Kerrey. I'm from Nebraska. I then worked for Congresswoman Maxine Waters, and I was a speechwriter in California for the city attorney there. I've also worked as a consultant and lived internationally, heading up the communications department for an international firm in the Netherlands before coming back to DC and joining Clyde Group. I'm glad to be here with you.
Thank you. We'll go with Charlita next.
Hi, all. I'm Charlita Rodriguez, producer at CNN, a daily show with The Lead with Jake Tapper on Monday through Friday on CNN. I've been with CNN now almost 7 years. I've been producing about 15 years and in television close to 20 years now. Happy to be here.
And lastly, we'll go with Chanel.
Hello, everyone. My name is Chanel S. Reynolds. I work for the Washington football team as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Programs lead for the team. I've been in the sports industry for 7 years, got my start with the Philadelphia 76ers, and after 4 years transitioned to Washington. So very happy to be here.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. We'll jump right in. We'll get started. A question that I have for each of you is, how do you feel the fact that you are both an African-American, but also a woman, has impacted your career specifically in the communications field? Whoever wants to jump first can do that.
I'll say, I guess more generally speaking, in any field, I do believe that the Black person has to work twice as hard to get the same recognition as their white counterparts. But the Black woman has to work 3 times as hard to get the same recognition as their white counterparts. And that's just, it shouldn't be that way, but that's just the reality of things. So when I showed up to work, I always showed up as the mentality is like, every day is an interview. Every day I'm being evaluated on how good I am, why I'm qualified to be here. But I guess it can be a chip on my shoulder, but I think it has contributed to my overall success within the career and my promotions year after year over my short time span within the industry. So those are my thoughts there.
I think it's worked to my advantage and disadvantage. Like Chanel was saying, I think sometimes you do feel, I think as a Black woman, we naturally as a whole, maybe as a disadvantage, hold ourselves back a little bit. We're not so eager to put ourselves forward and raise our hands for certain situations. Personally, that has been something like a growth element of my own, just trying to make sure I put myself forward and always trying to, raise my hand and volunteer for different things where it may be uncomfortable to do that. As an advantage for me, I think it makes me unique in a lot of companies that I've worked for, where I am the only Black woman in the room. So people want to hear what you have to say, and they want your perspective. And it kind of goes right back to that disadvantage where, as a Black woman, we a lot of times aren't so willing to be outspoken. And when you are put in those positions, you have to recognize that you are there for a reason, and people put you there for a reason, and they want to hear your voice. So you have to challenge yourself to speak up.
There's very little I can add to either of those, because I think that, kind of in that sense, the experience has been a little bit universal in that way. One thing that I challenge myself to do a lot is to what I call channel my inner Chad. I'm like, what would a white man do in this situation? He wouldn't feel like he had to have every single box ticked before he could speak up or before he could go for this job. I know that I've been put in these places because, I'm qualified. People don't give jobs. You earn a job, and you are here because you've worked hard. And it is often twice as hard. It is often that you could do so much more to be taken seriously. But then I just, kind of think to myself, a white man wouldn't hold himself back in the situation. So let's channel that power and kind of use your own unique position and your own unique voice to make the situation better.
Absolutely. Now, in that same scope, do you think that the advice that you'd give a young professional trying to enter the communications fields would differ based on your advice you were going to give someone who was of color versus your advice specifically to a woman?
Heck yeah. And I have. A lot of us, especially in communications, we jump in communications and, everybody wants to be on TV initially. And then you kind of get into the degree and you feel like, or you see that there's other opportunities there. And with that, when you did jump in, a lot of us went to HBCUs. You come from these neighborhoods who are like your own, and you're around your Black family, and then you're at your Black HBCU, and then jumping into the real world, it could be daunting to see like, oh, there's others, around me. And I tell them, the same way I tell myself to challenge myself and put myself in uncomfortable positions. I tell especially young people, you're still in a growth phase. In your younger years, be uncomfortable, be around white people. When you go to mixers or company events or the company, barbecue or whatever, try to force yourself to be around people who you're not usually with, who you don't usually communicate with in the office. When you're in that coffee room, say hello in the hallway, say hello, make yourself uncomfortable, and it makes you more comfortable as you grow.
It's interesting. My experience has been so different. And so when people have come to me for advice, I tell them, I give pretty much the exact same information with a few caveats. But I grew up in Nebraska. I was always in situations where I was generally either, even in my school classes, one of 3 Black people. There were 3 of us on the honors track when I was growing up. I went to a Jesuit university where, again, I was generally the only Black person in the room. It wasn't until I went to work for Congressman Waters that I was ever in a situation where I was in a majority Black office. And so when people come to me for advice, my kind of answer to them is always, it is about, what working hard, finding those opportunities where you can find them. But with Black women, I do really stress that you have to find allies. You have to find people who will support you in this path, because the doubt that can creep in, even though, I've been in majority white situations all of my life, like navigating that is a lot of work. There's exhaustion around that. There's doubt around that. There are things that you can do where you feel like you are very much in charge of a situation, where you can find that there are dynamics at play that you may not be familiar with. So finding kind of good allies, either within the Black community or kind of within the broader kind of network of people who can support you, is incredibly important. So mentorship for Black women, I think, is really, really critical. But other than that, the advice I give most people is pretty standard.
It's not much I can add to such wonderful answers, but I would say the main piece of advice I would say to my fellow Black women is that it's not necessarily about who you know, it's about who knows you in this industry and industries like ours. So both Charlita and Contessa both touched on it. You need to acquire those mentors. You need to step outside of your comfort zone, because when these positions are available, are you top of mind? Or did you clam up and get shy when that person, walked past you and you didn't want to introduce yourself? Therefore, they don't know you exist. So yeah, I usually encourage these individuals to step outside the box, get outside of your comfort zone, because you need to effectively navigate through your career. And there's actually studies that shows that white people know how to do that better than underrepresented communities. So I always advocate for us to be vocal about who we are, who we want to introduce ourselves to, and vocal about where we want to go in our careers.
And there's something else I wanted to add to that, since you brought that up, Chanel. And now that I'm working back at an agency and we're looking to nurture talent, that point that you made about white people being more comfortable stepping out of their comfort zone, they've got the tools to do that. There's greater risk for us to do that, especially as women, but then also as Black women. And so finding ways to make sure that people feel able to do that, I think, is one of the things that's really important to me, because it's one thing to ask someone to do it, but to help them navigate it feels like something that I can help with at this point, because we all had to do it. Otherwise, we wouldn't have achieved what we were able to do. Whatever whatever courage we had to make that happen for ourselves, whatever skill, whatever networks that we were able to kind of tap into, it's fantastic that we were able to do that. But it is not something that you're taught to do as a Black person because our circumstances are frequently so different. And so it's really a key to success, as you say. And it's one of those things that as I've gotten more senior in my career, I've looked for opportunities to help people learn how to do that and do it on their own terms.
Absolutely. Shifting gears a little bit, you all work in communications capacities, and there have been several instances of various things that have happened with social justice or social inequities where companies have spoken up about these things and have made their voices known or their stances known. And obviously there's many times where that hasn't happened as well. Being in your specific positions, how do you navigate a situation like that where like you want to say something, but you're not sure if it's really in line with what your company does, or you want to say something but the company hasn't? Like how do you reconcile the battle between you being a Black person and you being a professional at whatever job that you have? We'll start with Chanel, make it easy.
Sure. So I don't separate the two, and I used to. So, and you said it so in such an interesting way. How do you navigate you being a Black person and being a professional? Well, I'm a Black professional. So if my company doesn't necessarily speak on it, I've developed such a credibility, a trust, and a work ethic where I pretty much can be vocal about these things. And my company trusts the fact that, if I'm going to put something out there, it's not going to be anything that embarrasses them, but it's going to be something that I'm passionate about. I will speak with clarity. I'll speak with the facts, statistics if I need to. And I would just I would say to that individual, make sure that you're not speaking out of emotion. Make sure that you're speaking out of a place of authenticity and a place of education. If you're going to put something out there, what are your motives? What's your intentions? Because we want to be productive in the movement. We want to move forward. We don't want to make this an emotional thing, in my opinion. So.
I think also the level of accountability that companies have now to not just their Black employees, but also kind of the world, to make sure that people can bring their full selves to work, but also that they're not actively betraying social justice movements. And we can really parse like what that might mean or whether or not businesses are being accountable. But I think, one of the interesting things is this is a conflict that definitely was real for me for the first 10 years of my career. And now it feels like I hope this will be the case sincerely, that it will be less of an issue for people going forward, because it's just not fashionable. Let's put it like that. I think the world is moving towards a greater place of accountability. But I will say there have been moments where I felt unprotected or unseen, and I had to leave companies because of that. And I sometimes think kind of in these moments now about those people who made me feel that way, or companies that were not as accountable as I'd want them to be. And I wonder kind of what their thought process is. But I also know that they don't have a lot of Black people at that company now either. So, I hope that things are changing quite a bit, because the choices that, were very stark to me earlier seem to be less common now. At least I hope that is the case.
I'm in DC and I'm thinking about the last year, and I would say the last year, from my perspective, has almost given white people an opportunity to be more vocal when they see injustices, or be more willing to listen when I say, hey, I work at CNN. Maybe we should put that on TV. I can recall when one particular moment when the All-Star game was in Atlanta, and the Georgia voting rights story was kind of picking up steam that week. And we were having, my particular show, we were having, I want to say it was the Secretary of State on the show that week. And we're planning the segment. What are we going to talk about? And LeBron James had come out with this big, ad promoting his voice and what his views are on Georgia voting rights. And initially we thought, we already had the segment kind of outlined where we wanted to go and the questions that we needed to hit home. And I remember saying, we have to put this in there. We have to put this in there. And there was a little bit of pushback initially, like, no, here's already the outline, we kind of want to go this way. But here I am. I'm one of the only Black producer on my show saying, no, this is the audience exactly who this matters for. This is why this matters. And here's an influential voice who's trying to cut through. That finally did make it in the segment, but that's why someone like me and my voice matters, and people, around me want to listen. They want to hear my perspective, where I honestly don't know, but maybe 2 years ago, we would have stuck with the current plan,
That's amazing, and I'm glad that it showed through. Now, what would you tell someone who was thinking about going into the communications field? What are things that you think they should specifically know or should be focused on when trying to enter that field? I mean, there's a lot of different positions and a lot of things you can learn, but I'm sure there are some tools and some guidance and advice that's probably universal. So if you had to each give some advice in terms of literally just entry into the profession, what would you say? And we'll start with Charlita.
I would say hands down, no matter what, absolutely will help you in no matter what field you enter, know how to write. Know how to write. No punctuation, no your and your, all of that. And you don't have to write a book every day to learn how to write. You can practice it daily in your social media post. Reread it before you hit post. Know how to write. Hands down, my advice.
And we'll move to Contessa now.
I mean, that is really how I came into communications as well. It is, I think, the single most important skill that you can have. I think, in terms of the second most important skill, strong presentation skills and the ability to kind of really speak for yourself and speak in a way that, especially as Chanel said, takes a lot of the passion out of it, but is still compelling to people. One of the core skills that I like to look for, partially because I went through this myself, speech and debate training. It's really important for communicators too, even if you're not going to use it yourself, understanding the mechanics of how to help any client you might have, any elected official you're working with, work through that, I think would be the second most important skill.
And Chanel?
I would say to identify a mentor, and this mentor can be someone that doesn't look like you, and that's okay, or it could be someone that that is a Black woman. Have both in your corner. You're not subject to just one mentor. I challenge people to have a tribe of individuals that's around them, some that look like them, some that are in different industries, some that have different opinions and views than them, just so that they can get the whole scope and see your blind spots even when you don't see them. So I would say surround yourself with people who want to see you progress and excel.
Okay. It's fantastic, guys. In terms of applying to jobs or submitting resumes, do you have any tips on the application process, whether it be how to write or structure your resume, what you should do in terms of reaching out to people after you've applied for a job, and about follow-ups and feedback in that way? And we'll start with Chanel this time.
So these are my personal thoughts. I'm so open. I love to hear Contessa and Charlita's viewpoints, but I'm an advocate for, if you're newer to your industry, maybe like 1 to 5 years, you only probably need a 1-page resume. Please don't send me your 10-page letter. So yes, condense it, consolidate it, make it make sense. I'm in sports and entertainment. I was on the revenue generation side. If you're on revenue generation, make sure you're showing numbers, and make sure that you're showing like percentages, whatever sales revenue that you've acquired, because it looks good. As far as follow through, I do encourage individuals to follow up on LinkedIn. So make sure that your LinkedIn is all set up nice and pretty. You have your headshot. It's all well thought out, and you're able to message that individual that's the hiring manager. Maybe let them know that you recently applied. Open the door for a future conversation. Those are my ideas. So,
great, Charlita.
I struggle with this one. I do agree that resumes should be one page, hands down. I think even the higher you go, condense it. I'm sure you have a lot of repetitive jobs. Be creative and find a way to sell it in one page. Now on the follow through, this is the part I struggle with. Because you don't want to be the bugaboo, you know? I feel like if there's an opportunity, say there's a convention or a reception or something like that, go for it. Like if there's a way to meet that person in person, go for it. If you have an a person, you know, a third person who can help you put in a name, go for it. What's an email? I think. But you know, you kind of got to be strategic about it and not be a bugaboo about it. If there's a job that you've been planning on or plotting on for a while, maybe, you know, the first time you send that email and you're saying, hey, look at me. Okay, fine. And they don't bite, fine. Maybe you say in 3 months later, you send it again, or you say, you know, an update to your life. Look how I've progressed in the last 3 months. So I have somebody who, she's not applying for a job, but somebody who I've mentored for years. About every 6 months, she sends me a life update of here's where I am. I have recommended her several times for several jobs, just for, you know, she doesn't even need a reply from me when she's sending me these life updates. She's just saying, hey, look, I'm producing this show now, and I got to do this, and I got to do this special project. I appreciate that. And so I forwarded that email on. And then there was one more point I was going to make, and I totally forgot, totally spaced. If I remember, I'll come back to it, but I forgot. It was something on follow through.
And Contessa?
I mean, there's really little I can add here, and it's great because this is almost like a best practices seminar. But I mean, one of the most important things I've always found is when you're doing kind of that after, those contacts after you've sent that resume, make sure that you're talking about something that's relevant to them if it's in an email. So if you see something that's really interesting, so for instance, you know, the 76ers have just kind of started a foundation for something that might be kind of really compelling. You might say, I saw this write up. I would love it if, you know, kind of, I would love to be part of this for you guys. One of the ideas I had was perhaps you want to reach out to this community center and start this mentorship program, or whatever it is. It's always nice just to throw something in that email to show people that you were thinking about it. But one of the things that I always did when I really wanted a job was I would do exactly what, you know, Charlotte was talking about. I would go to the conference or figure out a way to learn someone at a happy hour or leverage your connections because, you know, as Chanel said, it's about who knows you, not just who you know. So being informed, being kind of, you know, really active and being strategic about how you're doing this follow-up is kind of really important. One other thing that, you know, I notice as well when I'm looking for staff now, I look at the resume, but I really look at a cover letter. I want to see what you've put in that cover letter. I want to see kind of how you use that space. Sometimes it's really brief, but you're like, I want to know who this person is who had kind of this, you know, kind of who wrote this. It can be really compelling way to show your personality and your experience and your.
Charlie, it looks like you remembered your point.
I remember. This is huge. Chanel mentioned earlier about, you know, communications. It's not always about who you know, but who knows you. Mm-hmm. Social media is huge, huge. I know, you know, your hiring manager's not supposed to look. They look. Everybody looks. They want to see your LinkedIn. They're going to check you out on Facebook. If they can get in your Instagram, they're going to look. They want to see who you're interacting with. You know, how social are you? Who do you know? Who are your friends? What do you like to do? They're going to look. Can you have the picture with the drink? Sure. Tastefully. I mean, we have lives. It's fine. Right. But be careful with it. You know, do you look kind of stank all the time on your Instagram page? I'm looking. Are you portraying yourself one way to me, but I know you're really not? Did you post about calling in sick a lot? You know, like I'm looking at that. And who you know. What's that?
I said that's an interesting one. I've never really thought about that. Like someone who talks about them like skirting their job, calling in sick to do something else. Thinking about that. That's, wow.
They say they're not looking, but they're looking. I promise you they're looking. And then also who you know, and vice versa. Did you look up the hiring manager? Is there an in there? And I think LinkedIn these days makes that incredibly easy to do.
Absolutely. So this is more. It's more on point because of the fact that you are Black women, but it is something that Black people generally, in my experience or lack of experience now, because I don't. It's a hair question. Do you feel like you were more comfortable wearing your hair a certain way in the interview process versus when you first started, or when you got more senior, you felt more comfortable wearing it a certain way? Like, did you have that question or that gut punch or that worry, like, hey, how do I wear my hair for this interview? How do I wear my hair for my first day of work, or I'm meeting this partner or this person? Like, is that something that you still think about? Is it something that you thought about then? I'm sure it was. But how does that impact the way you view your work now? And is it something that you go through?
I'll go now. I'm the one in braids. Yeah. And you know what? There's been a shift in that. I'd say 10, 15 years ago, I had to get the perm, every couple months, the straight hair, there was a look, there was the work look. And then in this last couple years, I'd say the last 5, 10 years, we've kind of more embraced this natural look. And the more we embrace it, the more we be us, the more they're okay with it. They're going to have to be okay with it. Now, I also come from a field where most of my industry is worried about not worried, but how you appear on air. A lot plays into that. So what I say, could you embrace your natural look on air? It depends. I think in communications, and a lot of times, be careful of your audience. For reporters, anchors on air, I would say, remember that you're not the story. Yes, it looks good, but can you wear it in a way that's not distracting to the story? I've seen people hit home runs with it, with braids, or with, there's a couple folks here in the DC market who have just gone there and do their thing with it. And that becomes them and their character. But I would say be careful not to overdo it. Can you wear the, kinky knot twist, as big as you want, and you're on TV? I mean, sometimes you just gotta, it looks good on Saturday, but gut check yourself and look in the mirror. You still have to be you do still need to be professional with it.
Contessa?
I think audience is so key. Let me just be frank. I've spent most of my career around white men who have a very clear idea of what young women should look like and do and be. And I did at one point wear braids, and I did feel a shift. I felt like somehow there was this question of whether or not my values or my outlook aligned with kind of what the white men I was continually around, what their values and outlook aligned with. And it was just kind of exhausting. And so I just thought that's something I don't want to think about. I also am one of the laziest people you've ever met when it comes to my personal appearance. I cannot be, and one of the things that's really fantastic about kind of natural hair care is it is kind of an expression of self-love. You spend time on yourself, you spend time kind of doing things with yourself. My choice now, I do wear a weave. Under this weave, I have my natural hair, which I will wear, especially when I'm on vacation. I love the freedom of it. I love the curls that I have. I think it's really fantastic. But in my daily life, I do find that still for me, especially kind of in the circles that I run in, it feels like this is the choice. But I haven't gone back to a perm specifically because I do hope that one day I will just be rocking my kinky curls. I would like to be able to do that at one point and have it be not a thing at all. And the other thing, I do talk a lot about Black women's hair with people who are receptive and aren't fetishizing me around it. Don't touch it. If I want to talk to you about it, we can have a conversation about it. But I also just think it's fine to be open about it. And it's also fine when another Black woman in my office, one day they've got, hair all the way down their back. Some days they've got, kind of an afro. I think that there's a whole generational shift there, definitely for sure. But I also when my white colleagues, especially people who are on my level, not necessarily in my current occupation, when they ask me about it, and I'm if you feel like you have to ask me about it, that means it's a conversation you don't feel like you should be having. So let's not have it. So there's a lot of teaching that has to happen.
Yes, definitely a lot of teaching that still needs to be had. I would say my personal experience with it, when I first started in my career, I didn't walk into the office with my natural hair. I made sure that it was flat iron, pressed straight. I had some sort of bone straight weave in, just because I did not want to cause too much attention. And I was ruining my natural hair. My hair was breaking off because I was trying to adhere to these European standards in corporate America. But I went out and got braids. It was actually 2 years within the industry. I was at the top of the sales board. I was making a lot of money for them. So I was like, all right, y'all can't fire me. I'm making too much money for y'all. Let me go get these braids real quick. And it was at that point where I had an epiphany where it was like, okay, if you don't like Chanel with braids, then you don't like Chanel that can make millions of dollars for your company. So I had to do some inner work there. But Contessa and Charlita, they both raised very good points, because when I know that I'm going to be media facing, or if I have a photo shoot or something like that, my look sometimes it may change depending on the audience. I may have the bone straight hair. I may take the braids out for the media interview, because you do have to know your audience, and you got. Charlita articulated it so well, y'all. Just do what Charlita and Contessa said. Speak over what they already said. I think they made some wonderful points.
Now, someone in one of the viewers brought up imposter syndrome, and I would love to hear your thoughts on that and how that may or may not affect your daily life in terms of work. And we'll start with Contessa this time.
I live with it every day. It is like the friend who is with me that I wish would go home. It is, it's a process of management. Again, I kind of create this avatar of like, kind of what would the Chad do? Because you have to really kind of almost forget yourself sometimes and almost kind of operate as if you are on an even playing field. My education is good. My experience is great. I know this. And so there's a lot of kind of just taking yourself in hand and talking to yourself that you have to do. And there, obviously therapy is not for everyone, but I find that like finding someone who can talk to about this kind of really helps you put some more context around why you might be feeling this way. But one of the things we talked about a lot during this time we've had together are finding mentors and strong networks, because you see women who are doing it and you know that like it is your right to be there. And that helps quite a bit. It's a process you have to manage. And it's one where you have to make sure that you're never letting someone else tell you your value and your worth. Some days it's easier than others, but it's always, at least for myself, something that I'm working with and working through at all times.
Absolutely. Chanel?
Absolutely. Imposter syndrome is completely mental. It's an internal battle that we have in our brains. And I say that to say we are in complete control of that narrative internally. Sometimes you may have to go into the bathroom and give yourself a pep talk, like I do, prior to meetings, and just remind yourself of who you are and the fact that they hired you for a reason. You're not just there by happenstance. You're not just there because you're cute. I'm sure you are cute, sis, but the reason that you're there is because of the accolades that you bring to the table, because of the ideas that you bring to the table. So you need to remind yourself of that. Imposter syndrome is a mental trick that's designed to trick you out of your purpose. So,
Chanel, I would say nail on the head right there. They hired you for a reason. I would say, to add to that, then do it. Do what they hired you for. And if it means stepping up sometimes or going in and really learning your craft and spending some extra time other than your 9 to 5, do it. My family kind of jokes on me because you can walk in the house at any time and it's on C-SPAN or CNN or whatever, but you learn to enjoy your craft. And that way, when you do step into work, you don't feel like you're being an imposter, or you don't feel like you don't belong. No, it's like crazy 3 negatives in that sentence, but you do feel like you do belong and you're bringing it every day. So like the more you can like hone in on that, and it's not being fake, or I will watch C-SPAN and then flip right over and watch the Kardashians. You're not like being not you. Clearly you wanted to be there because you applied for that position, and you that imposter syndrome, like leaning into that a little bit, like you're feeling that self of sense of doubt a little bit, means that you do want to be that to that next level. Well, lean in on that. And what is it that's going to take you to get to that, whatever it is that you feel like you're not adequately getting to? That's my advice to it, is maybe don't, instead of embracing the doubt and why can't I and why didn't they and that, maybe lean into, okay, well, maybe not now, but definitely tomorrow. There's no reason why you can't you should give people no reason to doubt you. And if I feel like if they still are, then there's issues that maybe you need to look at your company, and peace out.
I wanted to actually talk about something else too that reminded me of it, and you just really hit that right in the head, Charlita, at the end. There is something that we've not yet talked about, and maybe I'm sure, Charles, you're going to get there, but with the imposter syndrome especially, I do think that sometimes you have people around you who are invested in you feeling not your best self or sowing doubts for you. Not every workplace is one where equity is embraced. Not every workplace is one where you can find colleagues who are not threatened by a strong Black woman and someone who's kind of in their field working at this level. I myself have experienced it, kind of even in one of my more recent jobs, like in the last couple of years. And I thought that this didn't exist anymore. But I think that, one of the more complex issues is when you've got your own imposter syndrome going on just because of how, kind of you are. And I want to also say this, like a lot of high achieving people I know have that same imposter syndrome. It's not necessarily unique to us. The contours of it that we experience might be unique, but it's not necessarily unique to us. And then you have someone who's really invested in making you feel off and wrong and as if you're not suitable for what you're doing. That's when I think it becomes especially difficult. And that's when the company culture has to be really kind of considered. You need to have kind of allies, or you might need to make, some very stark decisions about what you do if no one steps up and helps you. But, I really wonder if either of you have ever experienced that in your workplace at all. And sorry to do your, to step in those questions.
Go ahead.
But I'm really curious.
Yes. And I think, in the day-to-day of going to work, you're always going to feel that. And I feel like that's when reality comes in. You're like, well, I got to pay the bills. This job is doing that right now. It's going to take, all this time to find another job, apply and get the hiring manager to like me and all that stuff. Reality starts checking in, right? Prayer works. So I can recall several managers who I felt like were trying to keep me down or so difficult to work with, or, we didn't see eye to eye. And when I think about prayer, it's funny how like you look back over those times, and one, you made it through, you got over those times. And then two, somehow, like not somehow, God worked it out where I feel like those people they were removed from my situation. Two managers that I'm thinking of like, I was still in my position. They were the difficult ones, and they just left. They moved on to their own journeys, which worked out for me, Hallelujah, thank you.
Chanel, do you have a response to that too?
Listen, I'm just piggybacking off of what was just said. Yes, absolutely. Prayer works. And I think we've all had that difficult person that was like, they had it in their mind just to make us feel inferior in certain situations, or maybe wanted to embarrass us or discredit us or whatever. But I think going back to one of the ladies said, I forgot, but I think preparation is key. I think preparation is one of the things that will help you overcome imposter syndrome. So when you know that you're about to face someone like that, like come into the meeting with your facts and come like ready to not necessarily, clap back, but come equipped to address what may be presented as a challenge. So when I go into meetings, I usually I'm prepared, but I'm also prepared with objections and how I'm going to handle those objections by those difficult people. And yes, I do say a prayer before those meetings. And yes, people have moved out of my situation because of prayer. So
That's wonderful. That's awesome. I have a bunch more questions. I could talk to you guys all day, but I will open it up for some questions from some others if they have them. I'll see them on the Q&A, and I'll pose them to these ladies here. But while we wait for those, I have more questions. One thing that I thought about, because of something that both of you, Contessa and Chanel, said about mental health. What advice would you give to a young professional dealing with those things, whether it's hard workplace issues or that imposter syndrome or just doubting themselves outside of what you said, like someone who's actually really having that challenge, that struggle, and it's really making it difficult for them to overcome or to work in the way that they probably could at their best abilities. What would you say, like, in regards to dealing with mental health and programs that you think might help with that? We'll start with Charlita.
It's hard. Have a tight circle. Build your circle, whether it be mentors or friends and family, just anyone who you can call quickly to say, I had a bad day. Guess what happened? I can think of a few friends who, drop of a dime, if anything ever happened. I can recall it always seems to happen on a Friday, where I have a bad day on a Friday. And it'll ruin your whole weekend, and by the time I get home Friday night and I'm like, oh my God, I can't go back on Monday. I can think of a few friends who, when I call and I say, if I call or text and say, hey, I need to talk, they know, I need a minute, who aren't going to brush you off, and it'll be a week before you get back to them. And same with family. And sometimes even, I'd be careful with this, but sometimes, in certain situations, social media can help, where if there's a group, maybe in your profession, I'm thinking of some broadcasting Facebook groups, where I can say, hey, I have this challenge, or are there voices there who maybe you can ping who can listen in on certain things. A lot of times, even outside of your immediate peers, but looking to people who have already done what you've done, or who I call my alumni, people who are a little older, maybe who've gone through, who you admire where they've become. That way, when you do reach out to them, you appreciate their feedback in your position for whatever's going on.
Thank you. Chanel?
Yes, I would say to tap in and get plugged into your company's employee resource groups if you have them, because community is everything, especially when it comes to mental health and maintaining that. If you don't have an employee resource group, I would challenge you to possibly create one, have that conversation with HR. I did it, it's possible. And it's important to not only your mental health, but your overall growth within the company. Secondly, I know that therapy is not for everyone, but I'll challenge everyone on this call to please go see a therapist if you can. We're in, today's day and age where companies will literally pay for it. So why not take advantage of it? We all need a therapist. There is a stigma against Black people and therapists. They say that, Black people don't go to therapy. We're not crazy. We don't do that. We go to church. We go to the barbershop. But I would challenge you all to go to that professional and to have, healthy dialogue with that individual, and where you can talk about things like imposter syndrome. So.
Tessa?
And I will say I was a psychology major, and so I have a natural kind of affinity towards the profession. But I will say that it took a long time before I found someone I was comfortable with. And so beyond not everyone being comfortable with therapy, it's a matter of finding a practitioner that matches your style and that works with you. Like, I have a strong set of preferences for the kind of therapist I want to work with. And it might take you 5 or 6 sessions before you find that right person. But just as you invest in your career by, your education, knowing your, facts, making sure that you are as tight as possible when it comes to what you're working with, find someone that you can confide in, whether that's a friend, a sister, a therapist, whatever it is. But I do think there's something really nice about having a professional. They can't take care of everything, I've got a sister who frequently will just pick up the phone and listen, and then I can be like, I got to go now, but I got this out. That's a nice kind of thing to have. And I've got friends that I've been close to for, kind of so long, and it's really great, but there's nothing quite like having someone who is kind of there and dedicated just to helping you find that balance and find that wellness kind of within your own kind of mental capacity. So, I joined Chanel. I challenge you to find someone. It doesn't have to be a psychotherapist or a psychiatrist. It can be any level of therapist that might be able to help you with any of these challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Earlier, you mentioned teaching and how there's a lot of teaching and guidance that's involved, and sometimes when it comes to the workplace, specifically regarding your hair. Now, in terms of social issues and social justice, or just the country's state as a whole, do you feel like your positions or even past positions have made you appear to your white counterparts as the arbiter or the decision maker or professor of Black history, of what it means to be Black in America? And I'll start with Contessa this time.
Oh, God. Let me just say again, I grew up in Nebraska. And so frequently I was asked, what is the Black position on this? And I'm like, if you have two Black people in a room, you will get a different perspective. You know why? Because we are not a monolith. We are just as diverse as you are. And so, yes, I have been put in that position quite a bit. Sometimes I take it on gladly. Like if I feel a person genuinely wants to learn and genuinely has no clue about where to start, I will take that on kind of gladly. Other times there's something about what happened in 2020 where at one point I just said to a friend of mine, I'm exhausted. Like I can't do this anymore. I can't be the person who, as the only Black member of a communications team writes all the Black issues. I don't want to be the person who you have to go to for all that. Like, why can't my colleagues be the people who kind of, face up to this? Maybe it's consultative or something else, but you also run the risk. And I tell this especially to the, some of the Black young professionals I deal with. You want to be a person who's known for justice and social rights issues, but think about what that might mean in terms of how your colleagues think about you, think about what that might mean in terms of like how you're working together. One of the things I was really energized by when I went to work for Congresswoman Waters, and she was like, I want to be distinctive on banking. I want to be distinctive on financial services. I need someone who can help me break out of that mold. Because frequently you can choose to be that professor, but people will also put you in there. And so I think one of the things that we have to do is make sure that we're making a conscious choice, whether or not we want to be the person who does that, and how people use that, how people use us for our time, our talent, our knowledge, whatever it might be. So I always just feel, especially now that I, literally, am in a very different position, I'm making a choice. Whereas before it felt like my energy was being taken because people would deputize me for a thing without even asking me if I was prepared for it, willing to do it, or even had any information, so it becomes one of the situations that, everyone looks to you, but you've got to make sure you're teaching them again that it's not your responsibility to be their, Black shine.
Yeah. Chanel?
Yes, definitely. I wear that hat gladly. I don't mind educating, as long as the individual is receptive and they don't have a rebuttal for everything that I say. But yeah, I think that, if we really embrace these moments, it can be a lot of teaching moments, in which we have conversations that were never had before, especially within our industries and within our respective companies. So yeah, I mean, as long as they're receptive, I'm more than willing to teach. But as Contessa said, it's okay to have a boundary too, because we do have our 9-to-5s that we still need to do. And it can easily turn into like you doing two different jobs. You being the Black person expert as well as doing your 9-to-5. So have that boundary. But if they're leaning on you for some sort of educational opportunity, like be honored that they trust you, trust your voice, and trust your credibility.
Absolutely. Charlie?
I would say these topics are going to come up. You're like the diversity in newsrooms or diversity in any office. You're, as we keep saying, you're there for a reason. You know the conversation's going to come up. You know the topic's going to come up. Be ready. I will say, jokingly, in those environments, I'm Googling just like you. But what I have seen is Contessa, you say you could have two different people in a room and two different opinions. I will say I've seen this opinion and this opinion. That way it's not on me, that way you're getting out what is the popular opinion maybe on 2-3 sides. And they're not always looking for you for your opinion. They want to know, the algorithms on my Facebook feed are going to be different than yours. Here's what I'm picking up, from my audiences. This is what people in my circle are saying. I want to know, hey, white girl, what are they saying on yours? Maybe it's a little different, and that's where the diversity comes in. And then you and the company can move forward with however you're addressing whatever topic.
Absolutely. Now, has there ever been a situation, probably stemming from something like that, where you felt uncomfortable at work having those kind of conversations, whether it's with someone who's higher up or someone who has some type of swear cachet or someone who has a very conflicting opinion to what you're saying? Has that come up, and how do you handle and navigate that? And we'll start with you, Charlita.
I'll put out there something. I'm pretty sure it's been public, but it was a very interesting moment last year. My company largely has a policy that when it comes to protest, you should be out there as a journalist if you're assigned to be out there to cover the protest or demonstration or whatever it may be. But you as a participant, just because you're coming out as a journalist, maybe, you don't want to be caught out there, with your, the flags or whatever, T-shirts or whatever. Like you kind of want to, because of the brand that you're representing, you want to kind of stay neutral. You should try to stay neutral as much as you can. But during the protest last year, I can remember, in a lot of companies, managers at CNN kind of sitting down and saying, okay, how are we feeling about this? There was still then, from the manager's perspective, of coming at it saying, hey, we still don't want our employees out there protesting. And I can remember specifically the pushback from not just Black employees, but I remember specifically an Asian woman who spoke, and she probably said it the most articulately, that, this isn't a right or wrong issue. Being at the time, I think racial justice was the big play here. It's not a right or wrong issue. There's no right or wrong to this issue. So, at this time, this kind of protest doesn't matter. And her comments then, I believe, cut through the managers who were speaking at the time. The next day, that policy changed. It was okay for CNN employees to go out and protest. And, something like that, it kind of, it puts you and your position and your color on the spot. You're the voice of this change. They're not saying like the protests are wrong, the managers, they're not saying those protests are wrong. They're just saying, here's our position on it. But, you have to kind of get out of that uncomfortableness and saying, you know what, I'm going to speak up for who I am and what I think is right. And that changed a policy. And sometimes that's what you got to do.
I will go to Chanel next.
Sure. Can you repeat the question just so I can make sure I'm fully addressing?
So, in situations similar to you having to teach or be that arbiter for Black people and what it is to be Black, have you felt in the workplace, or has there been a time where you've had someone with conflicting views or someone with battling views that has made you uncomfortable at work, or you've dealt with things that have made you uncomfortable in that way? And if so, how have you dealt with navigating that?
Got it. Awesome. Yes. So I would say I do take it upon myself to be a people advocate, especially for, my people. And I do have a distinct memory where it was during the hiring process, and someone had mentioned to HR and they said, hey, we want to make sure this is a sales position. They're going to be on the phones. We want to make sure these people don't have accents that are too thick. Mm-hmm. And to me, I said I had to raise my hand. It was uncomfortable. And I had to say, I believe that if we go that route, we are going to disqualify a lot of very qualified individuals. Number one, we're in DC. I'm not from here, but to me, everybody has an accent. Number two, again, I think that, sometimes us Black people, we can have thicker accents than a white person. That's just what it is. And it had to be an uncomfortable conversation, but it had to be addressed. And there's no official policy or anything in place, but I do believe that they heard me. And I believe that that conversation has been effective for not only that job, that vacant position, but for vacant positions to come. So.
Fantastic. Contessa?
I know we're almost at time, so I'll defer. I think that they had fantastic.
Okay. Well, yes, we are basically out of time. It flew by quickly. I couldn't believe that we're already done. I had a wonderful time chatting with you all. And if you haven't already, make sure you follow the Juneteenth Foundation on all social media. Donate, participate, volunteer. We have an awesome event coming up tonight too. Make sure that you follow Veeps or ABC and Live Nation, because we have a wonderful concert coming up. I want to thank these esteemed guests again. I really appreciated your insights and your input, and stay Black. Bye.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Thank you.